Okay, good evening. This is a meeting of the Freeport Withdrawal Committee at the Freeport High School Conference Room, Thursday, June 12th, 2014. It's now 6:36 p.m. and we have 100% attendance of Rich DeGrand, Dennis King, Kate Warner, and myself, Peter Murray. First order of business is to waive the reading of the minutes and accept them as written for the meeting held on June 5th and June 9th, 2014. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. Motion passes. So, second agenda item is a summary of the June 9th negotiations meeting. This was the first time we had a mediator, and we had hired a mediator to help with. To help the two parties go back and forth and discuss some of these harder issues. And just a quick summary in case somebody's listening, the two parties have agreed on 10 of the 11 legally required points in a withdrawal agreement. The 11th is finances, which we haven't talked about yet in detail. And then there's another issue, which is that which has to do with the enrollment commitments between the standalone Freeport district and the RSU going forward, and that is an issue that's not required to be dealt with in a withdrawal agreement, but in essence the RSU has decided to withhold agreement to the overall document until we have negotiated this additional issue. So we started right in, primarily focused on the issue of enrollment commitments and this so-called School of Guaranteed Acceptance. And again, just in case people are tuning in new, School of Guaranteed Acceptance is a term that the Department of Education has asked us to use to refer to this concept that a relationship between a school district that has a high school or any particular grade supplying a commitment to another district to give that other district unfettered access to that grade or that high school for any and up to all of the students from the other district. So in this case, because the RSU will not have a high school that it operates, they desire that Freeport provide this School of Guaranteed Acceptance service for their high school and for the Pownell Middle School kids for 2 years, which basically means that they are demanding that we take any and up to all of their students, and they've proposed a tuition which is the state average tuition, which is when you take all the cost, the state's perception of costs of the grade levels across the entire state and average them together, which is much lower than our actual cost. So in essence, that's what their proposal has been, and that's what their proposal remains. And quite frankly, during our June 9th negotiations meeting, that seemed to be their proposal all day long. We were there for 4.5 hours, and what the mediator came back with each time was essentially that, with maybe slight adjustments of language around it, like, well, we'll allow for a little bit of capital contribution on top of the state average tuition, and so forth. So,
well, to put that in perspective, Pete, I think it's important to note that we have had this discussion around the edges of enrollment commitment at our working group, at our meetings with the working group, and we were a lot farther along than that. There was a general understanding that we only had a certain capacity here, and the concept of requiring a community to build more schools so that you could tuition in kids, and they understood that. And for some reason, when we started this negotiation, it's like we lost all that.
It totally went back to their initial proposal.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest frustration that I have. Seems like there are 4 or 5 hours of my life I won't get back. And we could, if we'd started kind of where we ended the communications that day, we could have moved forward. And I just don't understand how they got so far back. We were both paying for this mediator. It was frustrating to not actually get some work done.
Yeah. It totally was, Rich. I agreed, and I think it was, I'm sure it was frustrating all around, but it did feel like we were beating our head against a brick wall there. When at the end of the day, the mediator came in himself and sat at our table and said, "I'm not sure it makes sense to schedule any future appointments."
Yeah.
We said, "All right, if that's what you're telling us, maybe it doesn't make sense." So right now we have no future appointments to meet with the working group. Of course, that can change at a moment's notice because they're a phone call away. But
and he did leave us with dates he was available. So.
And we know about availability and so forth. So we're prepared to revisit that, and that's one of the things we're going to discuss tonight. Is what's the strategy to move forward when we get in our executive session. One thing that I wanted to just bring up in this context is just to kind of step back and remember that there's nothing sacred about an RSU, right? It's a legal construct for how we organize and govern and pay for education of our students in the towns, and we were forced into this relationship in essence under all kinds of false pretenses, right? We were promised that we would be punished with penalties, financial penalties, if we didn't consolidate. We were promised bonuses if we did consolidate. We were assured that there was plenty of capacity in the high school to hold up to 700 or 800 kids, which seemed absurd prior to consolidation without expansion.
Not only that, when the council and a lot of folks in town pointed it out to them, we didn't believe we had capacity. They came back with, well, you would be at the top of the list as a school who consolidated for building projects.
So here we are. So in Freeport, we didn't enter into this union enthusiastically, right? We voted by a margin of maybe, I think it was under 100 votes. If like 60 people swapped their vote the other way, we wouldn't be in this union.
40.
Out of 6,000 votes cast or something. I mean, it was a big turnout, and it was a very slim margin, and so, by that slim. If we had known about any one of those three issues, if any one of those three issues had been clear, no penalties or no bonuses, or actually this high school needs a $17 million project to handle the kids, we wouldn't be sitting here today.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that Pownell and Durham voted overwhelmingly to get into this. And the reason I point that out is, at the time, Freeport was a minimum receiver. We were receiving very little money from the state in aid to education. So all of those threats were really empty for us because they couldn't send us much less without being embarrassed.
Right.
But Pownell and Durham, because of their rural character, were receiving an awful lot of subsidy, a lot of help educating their kids because of their rural nature, and the costs associated with that. So both of them, I'm sure, were influenced by the threat of penalties, because reductions in aid to education to them would be significant to them.
Right.
And the promise of redistributing any penalty money, I can't believe they said that out loud. But and even after we pointed out the school did not have capacity once all the students were here, they told us we didn't understand how to add students up, I guess. And that's when they told us that even if we did have a problem, the school building projects list, there would be favored status for schools who did consolidate. And when we went to talk to them about this current plan, we were told that we weren't on the 20-year window.
We weren't in the 100-year window. They have so many projects, and they were not giving any priority based on RSU consolidations or anything like that. So I talked directly with the commissioner at the time, Bowen, and he told me that basically you guys won't get any state financing ever for the project, so you're on your own. And since the consolidation, we've seen this kind of encore after encore of Freeport passing budgets, passing projects, and the other two towns voting against it. And if we think, in 2 days ago, we did it again, where Freeport is voting 3-1 to pass a budget in favor, and Pownell and Durham are voting 2-1 against in each town. 2/3 of the people are turning out saying they don't want to support it. If we think this is going to get any better in the future, we're fooling ourselves, because next year we're going to have $1 million added onto that budget just for the bond payment on the expansion on the high school. So those taxes are just going one way if we stay together, and I think that's an important point that people tend to lose track of in this context.
And to put that in context, Pete, what's happening is, because Freeport does get out the vote, and they largely, I guess, maybe I'm not saying this right, but they're kind of forcing their will. We're forcing Powell and Durham to move forward at a rate that they're not comfortable with or can't afford or don't want to. And I think that's just inherently unfair.
Mm-hmm.
So
we're at an interesting juncture right now, which is we have no debt in the RSU. We've had no new debt in the RSU, as Kelly was so kind to point out in that paper. We've got no new debt until we start working on this high school. We've got no debt together, and that means that this is essentially the last opportunity we have to take a look at whether this RSU is working and making sense for our kids before we really get a big mortgage between us and make it impossible for us to get out going forward.
It'll make it impossible for anybody
to get out. Any of the three towns to get out.
I think it's interesting that the RPC agreement essentially thought that year 5 was a good marker for whether this was working or not. It was built in to the contract that we reevaluate the RPC agreement in 5 years, and it's mandated in the contract that we do that.
In a sense, that's what this process is really all about. Is about revisiting the RPC agreement.
I was surprised to hear that last night. Mm-hmm. Did you know? Am I the one that didn't know?
I was surprised to find it too, but it was there, and it says shall, which is mandate, which is mandate language.
Clear.
Yeah.
And if we once we do lock this in, it's a done deal, and we're looking at least 20 years of working together. So. Do I think that's impossible? We can't educate the kids? No, I don't think it's impossible. Do I think it's optimal? Do I think there are better routes to go? Yes, I do. Right. And I think we ultimately does Powell and Durham want to be locked into a relationship with a town which they've got essentially by legal force instead of by kind of it's the right thing to do? That's kind of what we're getting at here. If we come up with a fair withdrawal agreement and the town of Freeport says, no, thank you, we'll stay in the RSU, well then, huzzah. The town of Freeport wants to be in, we all want to be in, let's go forward together. If, however, the town of Freeport votes against an agreement that is unfair or bizarrely punitive, or we don't even get to that point because we can't negotiate a good agreement, then we stay in the RSU, but it's
by default.
It's by default. It's a forced arrangement, and it will be uncomfortable for years to come. So I see all manner of reasons why this process ought to be allowed to go forward with an objective and realistic kind of proposal for withdrawal, rather than some kind of distorted obligation that we're currently being asked to provide. So
the only thing I would add to kind of that analysis. My concern, I stated this, the town council met with the board of selectmen from Powell and Durham at Mallett Hall in Powell a month and a half ago. And one of the things I was concerned about is I'm hearing different things from, folks who are not intimately involved in the RSU. The question that I asked all of the selectmen was, it's imperative that you're sure that the RSU is negotiating in the best interest of your community. Preserving an RSU at all costs is not in the best interest of any of the communities, I don't think. It may be the best way to go forward, but you need to know that for sure. And I think that both communities need to make sure that as we negotiate, we're doing the best we can for the kids in this system, all three towns, and the communities. Because this is going to be long term once we borrow this money.
There was a survey done recently in Durham where the community was asked the question, if you could choose a high school where you want to go to, what would you choose? And They chose Freeport as their first choice. 36% was the result, which means essentially, if you reverse that 64% of Durham residents did not choose Freeport as their first choice of high school. So to me, that it indicates that they're looking for some choice, and that speaks volumes as far as what the benefit from this agreement could be for that town.
And I was interested in the discussion last night because somebody brought up the point that there seemed to be a strong preference for Brunswick. And Brunswick,
Yes,
of course,
right.
has the capacity.
Equal to ours, 36%. I
Exactly.
don't see the decimal, but
Yep.
essentially 36% for Freeport, 36% for Brunswick
Right.
when they are asked to choose their
So,
first choice of high school.
the common sense question would be, why isn't there an agreement with the Brunswick School Department around this potentially to help meet that need? And there was supposed to be a meeting last night, was there not, with Brunswick?
She did mention that, and I didn't see anything about it, so I have not heard anything about any outcomes from that meeting.
Okay. Well, I know we did not meet with the working group last night. We we're all we wanted to meet with each other with our own representative groups first before we went back to meet with them again. And I know we have several other meetings planned next week, or next week and the week after. So, as we work through our kind of where we are here in our negotiating or strategy session, we might need to reach out to them and see if they're willing to sit and meet again. The other thing that occurred to me, we really have not sat down committee to committee without attorneys and superintendents and finance people and everybody sitting around the table. They're nodding heads and telling folks not to. And all of our communication has largely been through our chairs. So I think an opportunity to sit down with the 5 people from Powell and Durham and the 4 of us, and be able to talk amongst ourselves without having to without anybody writing it down and saying, you said you'd do this or you said you'd do that, but to brainstorm a bit and see if we can really understand what's going on. We tried a mediator, and that didn't seem to help. Maybe after a session like that, a mediator could help us if we understood each other better. I don't know, but that's something we might talk about.
I think we've talked about that in the past, and we have had that as a agreed upon tool. And Michelle and I have talked about it and agreed that would be something that we could do, or a topic. So I think let's figure out if that's something we want to pursue, or further mediation, or different mediator, or what are the variables we want to explore. Dan Stockford is coming soon, shortly, and we'll take a look at our latest language and some of the proposals that we've got for them, and what that strategy might be for trying to move this conversation into the realm of reality, and towards keeping the eye on the excellence of education and the ability to deliver for the kids.
Well, and just to kind of finish up some of the conversation on where we are in the negotiating, even the finance piece of this, I think each of us has a sense of where that is, both in the working group and in our group. And I think if we can agree on,
seems pretty clear.
If we can put some of that into a philosophy we're going to use to work through. Largely that work is math, and it'll turn up in the appendix to this agreement. So we have some work to do there still, but some of that is dependent on how and where students go and for what period of time and what have you. So the biggest thing in the room that remains
this issue, which isn't required to be in the agreement, but is part of our discussion nonetheless. All right, we next have public comment on the agenda, and there is an army of public here to talk with us. So, I think we should reiterate our offer to have anybody from any of the towns come and discuss this with us and share perspectives. We are certainly open, and the door is open, and we're happy to answer questions and talk and have a bit of dialogue.
And I would particularly extend that to folks from Powell and Durham, because it seems that they have as many questions as they have answers at this point. But I think that until we, you know, I guess until we can sit down and negotiate honestly and not just stonewall the process, we're going to be kind of stuck. And I don't think that bodes well for education in, Freeport, Pownell, Andover. So
Yeah.
I am concerned.
No, I think we all are. We're all. I mean, I'm feeling pretty frustrated and pretty concerned, and sure wish we could move this forward. Anything else?
I think I'm
Okay.
talked out.
May I please have a motion to consider action relative to an executive session to discuss follow-up legal strategy and consult with the committee's legal counsel regarding ongoing negotiations with the RSU5 working group pursuant to 1 MRSA section 4056E.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? We will enter executive session. Thank you all.